And so we return and begin again. Welcome to the Invisible Podcast, issueode 24. My name's Bobsy, and we are going issue by issue, page by page, panel by panel, theory by theory through Grant Morrison's Cosmic Conspiracy classic from the 90s, no less, The Invisibles. We're on issue 24. I'm recording this in late April 2021. And this is from the cover date on this issue 24 is September 1996. So probably came out late summer 1996, let's say, the summer of 96, if you can remember it. I can't remember it really. I mean, we'll get to that maybe. On the robustness test, this was, I gotta say, I went away this month for the first time in a very long time. Perhaps illegally, I don't really care. But this was quite a robust issue. It was in good fettle, and then it kind of just got jammed in the bottom of an overnight case while I took a journey, and now it's a little bit creased and knackered. Do I mind? Well, especially, it's not like my favourite issue, and in fact there are some kind of problems. There are some problematicals that we'll get to. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the other issues from it. If I can't find them, then I can't find them. No, they're over there somewhere. But so we're onto the cover, Sean Phillips's, and remember, if you kind of put the three covers together, so I'm Jack on a crucifix here, and then we've got, that's issue 23, and then we've got issue 24, and that's invisible in my hand here, invisible in my hand here, and it's like a triptych, yeah? So you've got all the boys on this side, Jack in the middle as the ascended Buddha, and all the girls on this side, and it's kind of, I don't know what it is really. Like it kind of works as a triptych, and it kind of looks okay. I think this kind of glamour shot of Fanny is kind of all right. I think the covering of Robin's face, because she's the one who we still kind of don't know yet. And in fact, we learned a bit of a sort of a bombshell style secret about her and the things that we'll learn about her in the forthcoming book of the Invisibles, volume 2, as they call it. Yeah, I mean, it kind of works. So we're moving from like masculine kind of like values and like yin energy and yang energy and action and hardness and violence and male attributes. Let's not pretend like we don't know what that means. And then, some kind of synthesis in the middle as Jack goes wild and far out. And then we're landing in a space which is kind of feminine. And yet, when you get inside, not really. In fact, you could say there's some pretty dodgy, not dodgy, but just like dumb kind of sexual stereotyping-y stuff in here, really. And it is, I mean, although I will say, I don't think we ever see, after this issue, I don't think we ever see Fanny in in her male form again, for want of a better word. She seems to thinks she's always just Fanny now. And that feels like maybe this is maybe definitely one of the themes of this first volume has been us kind of getting Fanny to that point, which is why she's kind of at the end point or the culmination of this triptych of issues, right? Of covers, anyway. And we've gone from urban to green. Yeah, we've gone from like solid skyscrapers to still quite phallic, but a bit more rounded, a bit kind of soft and curvier trees. So yeah, I don't really know what I think about this cover. I think honestly, all three of them are a bit meh, and that Sean Phillips's best covers kind of happened much earlier in the run, and this is the last cover that he does for the Invisibles. But it's not the last time we're going to see him on art duties for the Invisibles. In fact, when he comes back, which isn't for a long time, but when he does come back, it's one of the great runs. I think I haven't read it for a long time, but I think it's one of the great runs. I remember it very fondly. And it's called "Goodbye, Baby Rabbits" is the title of the issue. We don't really know why that is. I mean, we do. We're pretty sure that at the end of Watch with Mother, or not the end of Watch with Mother. There was like a sequence within Watch with Mother, we think, and I've literally had to ask my mother this, or ask someone else to ask their mother anyway, because I couldn't bother to explain to my mum why I wanted it for a comic, comic podcast, no less. So basically, it's an old BBC 60s TV show, either called Watch with Mother, or perhaps called Ragtag and Bobtail, or this is the real answer, Ragtag and Bobtail was like a kind of a sequence of like animated, perhaps hand puppet bunnies, one called Rag, one called Tag, one called Bobtail, within the with like a little segment called Ragtag and Bobtail within a show called Watch with Mother, which was kind of one of the first kids TV shows, kind of, I don't know, in Britain, certainly probably the first. And it ran for 30 years, or maybe not 30, it ran for a long, long time. And my mum would have watched it when she was a kid. It was never on telly when, I never saw it, obviously. But Grant Morrison would have too. And so I kind of don't want to say this. I kind of think I'm opening a can of worms for myself, which is kind of dumb. But this is the hauntology issue. We've got to the point in the podcast where someone says hauntology. I tend to avoid the term because it's just a bit bloggy, isn't it? It's just a bit of a term. And I try to avoid words like that, really, just because, not for any particular reason, but just because, it's fun to. Do we talk about hauntology now, or do we do it in a bit? Do it in a bit. Let's crack in. Our inside front cover, Escape from LA. Beautiful Kurt Russell's face as Snake Plissken. Escape from LA. So at the end of this issue, they basically go to LA, or they go to America, which is basically LA. So maybe that's the connection. I think what we've got here, this Snake, I haven't seen Escape from LA in ages and ages. Escape from New York is one of my favourite films, but I haven't seen Escape from LA for ages because it kind of wasn't as good. But actually, I bet that was just me being kind of young and sniffy, and I bet it's probably quite a good laugh. So yeah, next time I see it for free, I'm gonna get and watch Escape from LA. I do remember there's a fun bit where he's surfing on like some lava, maybe, or some sort of burning water. Probably lava because LA is like earthquake zone, isn't it? It's John Carpenter. He is the greatest film director. Escape from New York is a fave, obviously, but the Attack on Pelham 1, 2, 3. Just think that. Just think it doesn't get better than that. But if we're looking kind of bigwards at our themes, then it's the Escape from LA. So basically, this is Snake Plissken. And I don't know anything about computer games, and I'm sorry if I get some details wrong here, but basically Snake Plissken became Solid Snake, is that his name? Or Snake, anyway, in Metal Gear Solid, the popular series of shooty shooty video games that the children like to play, and the adults. So Snake Plissken kind of isn't Snake Plissken. He's like Snake from MGS, right? And when we say Escape from LA, what this means is this character is quite a good character, but jumping out of B movie land into B video game land, or even A video game land. Like I said, I don't know anything about them. And I know they're very popular, so presumably there's a lot of money and budget behind them. But yeah, so and obviously LA here just means the film industry. So what we've got here is like the Snake transcending, indeed surfing a wave of fire, which is pretty badass, away from movies, which is an essentially analog and declining medium. This is the first wave of that decline being apparent, and becoming video games. So this is like Snake making his escape from the movie screen onto the computer screen, which is a very safe place to be if you're a lively meme like he is. Escape from LA. Okay, page 1. It's an easy day at the office for Steve Yoel and Dick Giordano this week. So this is inside King Mob's mind. You remember at the last episode, they've been injected with they've injected themselves with some of Sir Miles's blood. Sir Miles's blood had the nanomachines which stop you getting cancer when the King of All Tears is around, turning the world into cancer. the other thing that the nanomachines do is that they boost your telepathic abilities, which is how Sir Miles was able to use the nanomachines to bust into King Mob's mind and read his mind. It's many issues ago. This is the final. I don't know if I mentioned this. This is like the final issue in the kind of the long arc that we've been running with ever since She-Man, basically, ever since issue 13 or whatever. So it's been going on for nearly a year's worth of comics. But it's only been happened. It's all happened within about 3 days in comic book time, which is nice. It's nice. It's good. I don't know how cleverly it was done and how well it sort of caught up with itself over time. And I've kind of stopped keeping track because the world went insane. There was a pandemic, but yeah. So there's a nice bending of time, like a nice long, slow, archy bend of time happening in the past 12 issues, and this is like the end of that. This is like the pot of gold in that rainbow. Shall I do a little lockdown report? Little lockdown report before we go any further. It's sunny. It's the spring. Lockdown has kind of finished, and Britain is sort of finding out what it is to be new again. Weird like social distancing kind of rules in force ish. Still, very weird like access to public space laws in still. Having to book a table in a pub just isn't good. Yeah, but the sun's out, guns out, fun's out. Really, it is. I spent the afternoon. I'm recording this a bit later in the day than I normally would like, but it's a spring evening and the sun doesn't go down till quite late. Me and the kid watched a band play some old rock classics on the seafront earlier. It was sunny. It was nice. It was really, really nice. And yet, obviously, we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. The sort of COVIDoid techno fixes haven't really. Well, they have come into effect, but they haven't come into like full effect, and we don't know how bad that'll be. The economy is somewhat smashed to pieces. We don't know how that's going to kind of manifest itself in terms of like people's livelihoods and whatnot. And this is the thing that's really interesting. Hung out with some friends yesterday. Just a bit of a sense of fragility in folk, I sense. Really lovely to see everybody. Everybody's well, thank goodness, touch wood. But a certain like people's like everyone knows someone who's died, so everyone's a bit grieving. Everyone's had an incredibly depressing year. Just a certain sort of sense of fragility among people. It's nice to be among friends and supportive and helping and talking these things out. It was incredibly therapeutic to be doing that, just chatting shit, really, and then not shit when it got serious, as it did many times throughout the course of a pleasant afternoon spent with pals yesterday. But yeah, like fragility is the word that keeps coming to me. Just everybody's had a shock, not a shock, but like an impact. Everybody's been knocked. And and everybody needs to sort of find the right way to get back in the swing of it again. How does that apply to this episode? I don't know. I don't think it does really. Maybe it does a bit in the sense that there's a lost and kind of protective, perhaps overprotective world, and then there's this kind of freer world, but the freeness is being offered and maybe quite circumscribed, quite not as free as you like, kind of free. And that'll become kind of normal. I think maybe there are some things happening in this issue, so kind of underneath the skin of it that we can get to. So this is so that was lockdown report. I might stop doing them. Depends how COVID mad the world goes. Again, or still, or what the post-COVID lockdown madness world is like. Pardon me. That's that tea I just drank. So 6 black panels. Nice and easy. Couple of captions. These are the thoughts. King Mob's passed out, but these are his thoughts with Fanny. Him and Fanny are sharing telepathy to work out a plan to defeat Miss Dwyer, who's moving in for the kill on Fanny. Do you remember? She's kind of gooped her up with Spider-Man webs, and now she's got to eat her basically. Like we've got our title again. Goodbye, baby rabbits. So yeah, oh god, I didn't finish even saying that, did I? So at the end of the ragtag and bobtail section, you kind of go, good night, Rag, good night, Tag, good night, Bobtail, good night, baby rabbits, or goodbye, baby rabbits, when the children's presenters say goodbye to the children. It's basically that. Now, I don't really know why that's the title of this issue. I'll be honest with you, like, there's no rabbits in this issue. No rabbits were harmed or indeed pleasured in the production of this issue of comic book or podcast. We're a rabbit friendly production here too. So why that? Why this weird cutesy, kitschy, nostalgic, not kitschy or cutesy, I guess, but this weird sort of nostalgic kind of real throwback to like this site of like absolute innocence. Is it to do with what happens to Dane stroke Jack in this issue, where they kind of reach this sort of pure state, this kind of like innocence, basically, but like absolute innocence, which is kind of the vibe you get from this invocation of this most kind of serene, caring, safe, protective, nostalgic, childish, childlike evocation of this lovely, cozy phrase that you hear on a kids' TV show that you kind of dimly recall as you become an adult, but kind of conjures these feelings, even in me. Just I know what kids' TV shows are like, having seen them as a child and then having kind of taken a child of my own through them. There is a kind of a like keying into like baby brain. Does kind of offer all sorts of comforts and insights, but comforts, right? It's good to be able to kind of simplify life to the level of a baby, right? In your own head and indeed in the baby's. So why this goodbye baby rabbits thing? Rabbits obviously are a kind of or hares, but hares are just rabbits really. Are a symbol of witchcraft and of lunar power, which is kind of in play here. Also shape-shifting, maybe. Also kind of Discordian disruption and hopping, moving rapidly from one phase to another, from one place to another. A bit like our voltigeur that we spoke about at times earlier. I don't really know. I've got some ideas. We'll get to the ideas in a bit. But yes, well, goodbye, baby rabbits. But really, we're not thinking about rabbits or what it means. We're just thinking about that sense of comfort, if you like, and sort of safety, security, innocence, like the William Blake Lamb innocence that one gets from being a child, or not even being a child, from the BBC. We're going to go with, right? And I do think I just mean that fairly specifically. And then we'll get to why in a bit. That's when we're going to be talking about hauntology. You can already see that now, can't you? Now that I've said that, you'll be like, oh, right, that's where it's going. Sorry, it is pretty boring. So these guys are sharing plans. So, credits. Grant Morrison, writer. Steve Yoel, penciler. Dick Giordano, inker. Daniel Vozzo, colours and separations. Clem Robbins is our letterer. Shelley Roberg is our editor. And the Invisibles were created by, would you believe it, Grant Morrison. So... And I do want to do this episode quite quickly, so it's good that we can kind of rip through these. So, monster closing in for the kill. Fanny and Mob telepathically working out a plan. The plan is, here's a hypodermic full of Key 17, the drug they gave me, the interrogation drug they used on King Mob, which makes words appear to be things. You look at words and you see the objects they describe. Key 17. So suddenly we've got a plan to take down Miss Dwyer. Back over with Jim and Robin on page 4. They cross this very creepy bridge and open a door. They're still in just like the House of Fun, but they're kind of going from the shopfront bit down through into the secret government bunker bit. They've crossed this bone and spider web bridge. A web bridge. I hadn't really noticed that before. It's a web bridge. And they open the door, and there's all this really sort of swirly, toxic shit. Even though, and then they close the door quickly, and Jim Crow's like, for the sake of your mental and spiritual health, you just got to sit here. So basically, he's going to go in, and Robin literally sits here. Now, even though we know she's got like a little bracelet that can, scare off nanotech or spirits or whatever, to stop her getting cancer. In here, this is another level altogether. And although Jim is only just like in a trance being ridden by a voodoo lover, which which certainly takes its toll on the ridey. Ridey? That doesn't sound right, does it? On the horse. Too. But he's just gonna basically it's really weirdly gendered that Robin has to sit this one out so that Jim can go and just be like a boss dude about it. It's not cool. And this happens a few times in this issue. The Frighteners is the advert for this movie on the following page. I think it works quite well. He says that insofar as Jim says after he goes through the room, he's going to kind of like put some magic on it to sort of seal it and stop all of this stuff leaking out any further. And then on this page, you have a demonic face sort of having been sealed behind a veil, perhaps, or whatever, but kind of pushing itself forward. It's an effective poster for the Frighteners. It says "dead yet," as in Jim kind of is dead because he's being ridden by a god of death, right? And he's going into a place where death is a very real kind of problem, and it's frightening. And I think this advert kind of works here. So this is the Frighteners movie by Peter Jackson, starring Jake Busey. Yeah, boy, Jake Busey, the chip off the old block. And who else? Don't know. Oh, Michael J. Fox, bless him. Yeah, okay. We all like him a lot, don't we? I haven't heard from him for a while, but I hope he's all right. Because everybody likes Michael J. Fox a lot. But it's also about these dead spirit things, and this kind of like hyper-gothic necrotech place that the House of Fun is kind of turning into. That's kind of where the Frighteners in the titular Frighteners in the film kind of come from. Remember, like, this is like the movie. I think this is like Peter Jackson's first Hollywood movie. And what's quite interesting about it, kind of, I guess, in a historical context sense, is that it's the first point where he really showed that he could take a reasonably large budget, Hollywood level special effects rather than just like homemade New Zealand special effects. No offense, and create quite a compelling narrative out of the special effects, rather than just kind of throw them on screen and tell a story. Really, I think. And then and on the back of that, basically, he landed the Lord of the Rings gig. Really. And I love those films. I've seen them a great many times. I know the memes. I know the beards. I know the boys. I know the hobbits. I've seen all of them a lot. And yeah, like Lord of the Rings used to just be like nerd shit culture. It used to just be like hippies and like weird boys knew about it. And now it's like everywhere in the culture, thanks to those movies. And that's it's an incalculable shift in awareness for those kind of like British boys' school fantasy stories. And now they are still super macro massive. Still just like formative pillars of the culture. And in that 20 years since they kind of popped up, the culture's been kind of shit, right? So I wonder how much Peter Jackson and J.R. Ewing I'm doing that on purpose. I don't call him J.R. Tolkien. I call him J.R. Ewing. Should take the blame for. Maybe we didn't need him that much. I think there's a lot of weird Little Britain stuff in Tolkien. To be honest, I'm not that keen on it. I think the books are doesn't matter whether I think they're boring. But yeah, I'm a bit like, do I like Peter Jackson? That King Kong movie is fucking shit, man. Really bad. I think I don't know. I do really like those films, but I'm not necessarily sure they were good for us. Anyway. Over on the other side, the Crow, City of Angels, they're pushing this hard on the advert front. This isn't even an advert for the film. This is an advert for the soundtrack. The Crow, City of Angels. We've got this kind of like crow skeleton, almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Fossil here. And then on the back page, spoilers, there's an advert for the film, and then on the inside there's an advert for the soundtrack. They're really pushing it hard. This is the first Crow sequel, I think. I'm pretty sure. And the first Crow movie was like a breakout hit because of poor Brandon Lee, bless him, dying on set, and them kind of completing it using just computers to fill in his face, bless him. And yeah, I mean, and again, it's yet more death stuff happening here. Obviously, Jim Crow has got a crow. He's called Jim Crow, so we can see why there's a crow reference happening in the comic here. Haven't heard this soundtrack, but check it out: Hole, White Zombie, Filter, PJ Harvey, Bush, Tricky versus the Gravediggers. Haven't heard that track for a long time. I bet it's brilliant. Bunch of other people: Iggy Pop, Grace Slick. Yeah, it sounds alright. So I bet that album's got some good stuff on it. Tricky versus the Gravediggers. I haven't listened to that for a long time. I'm going to enjoy that later. Yeah, so I bet that soundtrack's right. I haven't done my homework on the music this week, but I have been to the pub. Sorry, this month. So maybe that's why. Okay, so do you remember we left Dane stroke Jack in Nirvana, not the band, not the band, last episode? And we see him we see now a red dot emerging from the center of the infinite light, and that becomes Barbalith. And Barbalith is saying, "Wake up, return. This is not your place. You must return, Dane. You must return." And Dane is so blissed out. He's like, "Dane? Who's Dane? I'm Jack Frost. I'm Jack Frost. Am I? Oh, I just thought I was God. I thought I was the big Buddha man." With a Scouse accent. Barbalith kind of orders him to return from the endless light because there's work to do, right? The game, or as Barbalith puts it, the game is still in progress. Now, so remember in its other form, we've seen Barbalith as a green sphere sometimes too. So, and remember, it wasn't really made very clear, but between scenes in the previous episode, we went from Dane in Infinity and Bliss to the abscess that's threatening to devour the universe. Remember that they kind of made that the King of all Tears made from the poor cleaning lady or tea lady. Pardon me, I'm a bit gassy. Pardon me. Dane going into Nirvana and Bliss is powering up because it's a false bliss, like they all are, right? Or false Nirvana, like if you think you're in Nirvana, you're not, right? That's powering up the abyss and making it burst, making it swell and burst and potentially eject the contents of a new universe over our current universe, thereby kind of destroying our universe basically, and replacing it with one which is much more Archon friendly. And our one is pretty Archon friendly already, let's be honest. And Boy is horribly freaking out, and she basically just freaks out, and then kind of passes out. And it's like, all right, so not only did Robin just have to go and sit down in the corner while the boys dealt with it, now Boy has literally just got and fallen over, leaving Mr. Six to deal with it. And it's a bit like, couldn't the comic have found a better thing for the female character to do, or just sticking them looking pretty on the cover? Do you know what I mean? It's twice has happened. But this bit is really good after that. So we get more of the speed rap poetry. And it's very Clive Barker by this point. Shall I just read it? I did really like it. It's cheesy, and you can see how a grown up would read it and be like, "That's lame," but I quite like it. I really do. Okay. And remember, this all could just be because Dane is too blissed up. His bliss up is powering the abscess into exploding. And it says, we don't know who this voice is meant to be, but it's just the narration of the comic, right? The abscess is bursting. Pain and fear, delirium and dementia, sickness and guilt. Ooh, and we get a good explanation for all of this later on the letters page. There's some stuff happening. Back to the septic supermatter flooding his brain, psychic pus erupting from the infected zones, the fever kingdoms of the outside. Boiling, it narrows the focus of its sensory superstructure. This is the abscess, I think, to scan the four-dimensional process entity in its midst. The four-dimensional process entity is Mr. Six. Big Malky. It sees him inside out from birth to death, leafing through him for a shape to dress in. He glimpses a child's drawing of the devil come to life, Cthulhu frothing with chaotic energy. The sepsis selects its form for manifestation. And then it gets really good. I fell down a proper rabbit hole with this month, honestly. Unorthodox, and like it's like speaking of Lord of the Rings, you want to say it in like an Elvish accent. Unorthocracy, 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 unorthocracy. Unorthocracy, mother without boundaries, who nourishes Ephemerphi, the angel of pleasure, and Yoko, angel of greed, and Nenetofni, angel of pain, and lastly Blaumen, angel of fear. These and their 360 abortions. Okay, let's stop there. Let's pause there. So this all comes from the secret gospel of John, the Apocryphon of John. And I read that plus a bunch of other Gnostic stuff this month. Sorry, because of this weird thing. I'm like, these aren't just names that he's made up, and indeed they aren't. What am I going to say about them? So I like the fact that unorthocracy basically sounds like leadership from the north. Quite like that. And I don't mean the north of Britain for once. I mean northernness. I mean the sense of being pointed upwards and to the stars, right, or to the central star, right, the pole star. So this all comes from the Secret Gospel of John, right? Now, the only kind of research that I really trust for the Invisibles read-through podcast stuff is the stuff that just pops to me out of thin air, right? All of the book learning, all your fancy book learning, all the stuff that I know from having read this comic a million times when I was a kid. None of that means anything. The stuff that's important is the stuff that just kind of happens via synchronicity, man. That's what I trust the most. So, remember way back in like issue 8, the head of John the Baptist? And I had a bunch of like weird John the Baptist syncs sort of happening that month. And it was one of the first. Actually, was it one of the first signs? I can't remember, but it was one of those signs where it was like, oh crikey, this is quite odd that the comic is kind of kicking up all this stuff in the world around me. So yeah, so obviously, the Invisibles is like a Johannite heretical text because it talks about John the Baptist as being, important, let's say. Perhaps like rivaling Jesus important, right? And then in the same issue, Robin goes, whatever, we don't care about that. We don't care about the head of John the Baptist being the ancient secret Templar treasure or the the true kind of like oracle of the New World Order, or the outer church or the baddies. If you don't care about that, it's all just rubbish. It's all just something which the Invisibles knew anyway, and they've been factoring in that Johannite technology into the evolving invisible framework for ages anyway, because it's basically like speaking in tongues, right? It's like glossolalia, angel language, none of which are the same thing, but that's kind of how the comics are there. So it's to do with John the Baptist, but Robin says not John the Baptist. So maybe it's not John the Baptist. Maybe it's other John. Maybe it's John as in the secret apocalypse of John. Sorry, the secret gospel of John, who also wrote, who's John of Patmos, who also wrote the book of Revelation. Or both of these books are ascribed to that disciple of Jesus, right? Maybe that's the John that the Invisibles is interested in. And that's totally backed up, obviously. And obviously, I think Morrison obviously knows this. This isn't coincidental. in the Gospel of John. It's kind of cool. Jesus has died, and John is kind of, all of the disciples are like, "Oh man, this is a bad scene. I think there's something else going on here, but this is bad. Jesus is definitely dead, um, or at least he's dead and he came back, but he's kind of gone again. You know, that always really pisses me off about the Jesus story. It's a bit like, so he comes back, but not really. He comes back from the dead, but he doesn't hang out or just be like, "Hey, I'm back. I'm going to carry on." He just kind of like flits around, doesn't he? He just kind of keeps appearing and showing off his wounds and stuff. It's not like he doesn't like hang again. They don't have another supper. Um, yeah, so that's happened. John is like walking around near the temple in Jerusalem, and some dude comes up to him and goes, "Your Jesus was a twat, wasn't he? He's dead now." And John's like, "God, he's right, really." So John goes off to a hill somewhere and kind of is going, "Jesus, what the hell, man? Why did you die? Don't get it." And then he has this massive revelation, not his last one, but maybe his first one. And the and this kind of and Jesus basically comes to speak to John and just lays down the whole, lays literally the creation of the universe from nothing to today, just lays it all down for John in a way which is very heretical, but does kind of, you can make Genesis, etc. You can make the Old Testament sort of fit around it, because this is, you know, this is like an attempt to, you know, update and assimilate as much as it is to replace the kind of the previous, or like the old dispensation of the pre-Jesus-y Jewish leaders, right, or prophets. um and and Barbalith is in it. Basically, there's no other way to say it. It's not Barbalith. It's a character called Barbello, which is basically like the second thing to come into existence after the one, or the monad, or God, like just God, basically, which is a vast unending light. And then at some point within this kind of indescribable unending light, a point appears, and this point becomes Barbello, and Barbello sort of goes, "Hey God, look, look that you've become self-aware. Congratulations." And then this kind of discovering of duality within one obviously cascades, right? And you get three, and you get four, and then suddenly the universe begins to manifest, and then the spiritual universe begins to manifest, and then beneath that spiritual universe, like the physical universe, this is all kind of like pre-time. Then the physical universe, which is where time is, happens. So you've got all of these kind of layers and things, right? But Barbelith is like the first thing that happens, really, and um, represents kind of like the first miracle, I think you'd say. Like the existence of the monad isn't, or of God, is just a fact. It just happens. It doesn't need a beginning or end. But for then something to happen within that, that's that's it's basically the first thing that happens in the in all of existence, right? Uh, and Barbelo, and then kind of creates the world. Well, no, Barbelo kind of creates Barbelo and God, as they're kind of like recognizing one another and and just like developing awareness. Um, all of these kind of virtues kind of are created by this process of like dialogue that they have, or not dialogue, but kind of like psychic union, right? Not psychic, but like cosmic union. Um, and It kind of goes on, and it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, I don't know shit about anything really, but like it strikes me as being somewhat obviously like an an Aristotelian text, insofar as when the first things in the universe to be created after Barbalith, are these kind of like other aspects of these other eight aspects of God, uh, which are very much like, which are kind of like psychological processes, but are also like virtues. These are also like positive character traits, which the authors of this text, uh, want you to kind of aspire to, right? It's obviously quite like the most important things in the universe. The first things to be created after God and Barblith kind of just like realized they were there, um, are these, like foresight and patience and stuff, like ways of behaving well, virtues. Um, and yeah, so it's like, there's definitely like there's definitely like a politics involved there, is what I'm saying. There's a social angle. There's people actively working on what it is to be, not just to be, but to be good, right? And that's really important as a kind of getting an idea for the people who are writing this stuff. But it gets much better. Um, the kind of the process of creation goes on. Sophia, or wisdom, is one of the 8 initial things that's created by God and Barblith. Include, like, I think God and Barblith are like in the 8, and like the 8th one is wisdom, and wisdom tries to, because she's wise, she tries to think of something which isn't already there. She tries to have a thought which isn't with it. She tries to think of something which isn't yet enfolded in all of creation, and the only thing that exists in creation are these 8 kind of conjoined virtues. Um, and that thought of trying to think about something which isn't this holy purity uh, creates like a flaw. It's like and a fall, right? It's a fall from grace. In creation, this kind of like blot occurs, and this blot kind of cascades downwards and becomes ultimately like Yaldabaoth, who is kind of like the god that you kind of know in the Bible, uh, and Yaldabaoth creates the world. And that's where like Genesis comes from, and the kind of in the 8 virtues, in order to redeem the fallen world that Yaldabaoth owns, uh, they create this kind of like spirit being called Adam, and he's like Adam from the Bible, obviously, but like the first man, but the kind of the psychic self of him, but rather than the physical one, and they kind of inject that into Yaldabaoth's universe because, and they fill it with all of these kind of capacities or angels, but also demons, that create the capacity for redemption or salvation within the universe. Because basically, by refining what it is to be Adam, or what it is to be a man or a person, and aligning your personhood with the will of the will of the 8, you get to, like, you kind of redeem the universe. Like, so they create humans to be in the universe and to have the capacity for reminding the universe that God is there. And that happens when you remember, or when you cease to forget, that you're part of this kind of like super material cosmic holiness, basically, right? I don't really know what that means. I reckon, just from my own experience, I reckon there are moments when, and they occur actually around synchronicities and stuff, but there are moments where you do, where you feel, and they happen. Joyce or someone would have called them epiphanies, but they happen quite unexpectedly, quite randomly, quite banally sometimes. Obviously, you can make them happen by certain practices. You can make them more likely to happen by prayer or drugs or fasting or good deeds or living selflessly or just fucking dancing a lot or whatever. You can make the world just click, just feel right. And all of your kind of doubts and all of your existential trappedness just stop, right? I know you've had this feeling before. You've had moments like this in your life. Everyone gets them. Uh, and suddenly you and the universe are just groovy with each other. And that is the salvation, I think. That's how I read it. That's the salvation that Jesus offers to John while they're having this chat, because John's going through this terrible crisis after Jesus has died. And Jesus is like, no, man, it's all good. I was just an example of Jesus doesn't say this, but it's kind of implicit. Jesus is kind of going, what I did, me like living out my destiny to be crucified and give you all this kind of message, is the way that the universe gets redeemed. It's the way that existence isn't awful, right? Because existence is awful, but by having humans in it that are capable of kind of freeing their mind, this is all just and as you can hear, this is just what the Invisible says as a solve to the existential crises of humanity, right? Um, by freeing your head, everything becomes all right, only for a minute, and then it goes, oh, maybe not for a minute, maybe for a while, but you can make the world okay by getting into alignment with the will of God, right? Where was I going with that? So that's hugely heretical, obviously, as far as the church is concerned. And whether this John is the same John as the John of Revelation, or whether it was just kind of a cult or an offshoot of Christianity, or just kind of an early, or maybe just among the early Christians, this is what they all thought and they all wrote down. This you don't get an ordered society by telling, or you don't get an empire by telling everyone that by being more God, you can you fulfill the purpose of the universe. It's like it's deeply heretical. It encourages rebellion against anyone who's trying to tell you, no, the purpose of you is to work the fields and make money for me. Like it's deeply kind of antithetical to any sense of control. If you're basically saying, well, what God wants you to do is go and find your true self, basically, and that's the only thing that matters in the universe. That's the only important thing. That's the only way that the universe itself ceases to be awful. And that's kind of groovy. Like it's kind of groovy. It's quite a good. It's quite a good message, and you can see how not just the empire, but the empire as it kind of morphed into a Christian empire would have suppressed this kind of knowledge and just gone with like, no, we won't be putting that book in the Bible, thank you, even though it has every much right, by any kind of sober assessment of its kind of canonical or canonicity, its deservingness of being read next to all of the other books of the Bible. It's just as okay there. What was I trying to say? Yeah, okay. So in the Nag Hammadi Library in 1947, am I getting them mixed up now? Am I getting the Dead Sea Scrolls mixed up with the Nag Hammadi? I don't know. But basically, yeah, someone finds a big urn in, I think it's 1947, and there's all of these Gnostic texts, which are basically books that were expunged from the Bible because they tend to not be in accordance with a continent spanning empire, and to be not teaching their like values of their state religion, basically. In the Nag Hammadi pot, there was loads and loads and loads of different texts that are kind of about this. There's loads of the secret Gospel of Thomas and stuff like that. There were 2 copies of the Apocryphon of John, of the secret Gospel of John. So that's unusual because it's the only one that there were 2 of. So it was obviously, so that means 2 things. It was it means one thing. It was popular. It was more popular than all of the other ones and more worthy of preservation than all the other ones because it really does lay it down. What's exciting about it is that it creates and kind of is, by any measure, a complete system of magic, really. If you have a bit of chalk and a fancy robe and a copy of the Gospel of John, you can do a lot. You can do a lot. And there's obviously this kind of, and it obviously kind of connects to, there's obviously these theories that Jesus was kind of like he was obviously a healer, right? What kind of healer he was doesn't mean what we think it might mean. And it's quite clear through the Gospel of John that it's basically like a very comprehensive list of spirits and ghosts and demons, which you can use ritual magic techniques to communicate with and control, right? And strike bargains with, or dominate, or beg, or however you're going to vibe with them. And there's one. I mean, have I got the page open? There's one for every, there's one for every finger. There's one for every organ. There's one for every part of the body. Because it's because this was whoever put this book, the Apocryphon of John, together. They obviously, and this comes through really, really clearly, because a lot of time and effort is spent on these lists of spirits. They were obviously into healing, because if you've got a sore finger, don't worry, I've got a demon for that, and I'm going to talk to the demon of your little finger, and we're going to get the demon to either leave your little finger alone or to go in there and fix it, right? And yeah, and this isn't just for the body, but it does go into literally every part. Like there's one for the shoulder, it goes into every part of the body, and all of the elements, all of the primary virtues. Again, the kind of the cosmic virtues get sort of turned into spiritual and earthly virtues through the mediation of these demons. And if you can control these demons, you can basically control the whole world. Like that's definitely what the secret gospel of John is saying. It's basically saying, here you go, here's a handbook for you. Not only freeing your mind and your ass will follow, but a complete list of how you can do that to everyone around you, to the whole manifest universe. It's big ass witchcraft magic, really, and you can see why, like the Pope or whatever, doesn't want you to read it. Now, back to the comic. So, unorthocracy is the mother without boundaries, and there's kind of you can tell from the translations that are here that Morrison's probably not getting this from a copy of the Gospel of John, but I think he's got like a handbook of Gnosticism that came out in the 90s. He's probably reading it from that. So Unorthocracy isn't the mother of these other demons, FMC, Yoko, Nenentofni, and Blaumen. She's not their mother. She's the mother of much more kind of fundamental spirits. Hot, cold, dry, and wet. And potentially, she's the first mother who's mentioned. So she's the mother of Cain and Abel and Sabaoth and like everyone underneath. Her name's kind of slipped in, but potentially everybody underneath Yaldabaoth, who's insane god of the Hebrews kind of thing, or sorry, of the Hebrew people, the one who keeps blowing up everybody's city and giving you all curses and stuff. She's like the first mother that's mentioned, and so she's the mother of things like hot. She's the mother of things like cold. She's the mother of things like dry and wet. She's a very big ass she presence, like feminine principle within the universe. What does it say here? She is unlimited. She mixes. She is matter. So basically, she's kind of like Tiamat or something. It's like unorthocracy is stuff, right? All of the unveiling, so you could say, well, hang on, I thought Yaldabaoth created physical matter, and it's like he creates like starlight and all the physical matter, but when that physical matter kind of manifests, it becomes unorthocracy, right? So anything physical, anything matter comes from her, and because she's kind of like a badass, it's a bit gnarly, right? Having a body. And then you have FMC, the angel of pleasure, and Yoko. I love this bit. Angel of greed. Right. So in the comic, it's Yoko, Iocho. A load of other translations spell that Yoko. Now, in a comic which is basically about how John Lennon is God, having Yoko be the angel, like John Lennon's wife, be his cool wife. I mean, not to say that, what was her name? Linda? No, not Linda. What was John Lennon's first wife called? No, that's silly. Why can't I remember that? Anyway, Julian's mum, uh, having the goddess of greed, sorry, the angel of greed, be called Yoko, is quite funny. And I will say that, like, this other translation that I've got on my Kindle, uh, doesn't say that Yoko is the angel of greed. She says she's the angel of desire. That is very much John Lennon's thing. He was like, John Lennon was like badly pussy whipped by Yoko Ono, right? It was like he was deeply like sexually helpless before her. Yeah, and so it's quite interesting to look at these parallel translations. Uh, so where FMF, so where FMMF is called the angel of pleasure here, she is in the Invisibles. She is in my translation here as well. Yoko isn't greed; she's desire. But that's quite interesting too, right? That there's a little greed and desire, kind of hunger, yeah, become the same thing. But greed is hunger plus, right? Greed is hunger out of control. Um, Nenentofni is here glossed as distress, not of pain, as it is in the Invisibles. And Blauman is associated with fear. Oh yeah, which is the same. Okay, and they rule these 360 abortions, which are uh, they're just they're just 360 abortions, which are basically the kind of the rulers of the enfolded of just like the earth under the sky, if you like. I don't know this stuff very well, but it is super interesting, very cosmic, and yeah, quite practical. I think. Do you know what I mean? You can use it. Um, have I said the last about that? Yeah, I just think it's quite interesting the way that like these negative emotions, which are happening to Mr. Six as the abscess pisses its presence all into his mind, right? Uh, and he's maybe keeping up with them by naming them, because that pops up again in a bit. Naming magic, which is kind of what the Gospel of John, it gives you the names of all these demons so that you can talk to them and bind them. But really, I mean, maybe you're just talking to them, striking a deal, coming to a friendly agreement. Um, yeah, like the way that you frame these sins, these kind of scary bad things that all of these angels are responsible for, they're kind of they do just sit on the other end of a spectrum of a good thing. And pleasure kind of isn't a bad thing in itself. Greed is just hunger plus. Uh, Pain or distress are kind of pain is a useful thing to tell you to stop hurting yourself. Uh, and fear or distress, they kind of they make you seek comfort, right? So they're bad, but they're maybe I got carried. Like, that was all a digression. We're still just two paragraphs into this big old page of Clive Barker stuff. And this is so Clive Barker. The Brotherhood of the Scourge in rubber hoods, eyes and lips stapled shut, dukes of the first tread. So this is all like the bad matter within the abscess, which is about to just like erupt into our realm. A sacrifice. A sacrifice might seal the abscess, he's thinking, as the thoughts scream and tear one another apart. A dreadful crown is set in place, cracking open his head. I really like this bit. That like all of this kind of psychic matter starts to sort of like manifest as like a exo skull on uh, Mr. Six's head, and it disappears here. Annoyingly, the art just goes a bit inconsistent, but it's back again. It's back again in the next panel. But this is good. The way that all of this bad shit is like condensing as crystal that's kind of forcing its way sort of kind of through and into Mr. Six's cranium. It's really good. It's all like purple and it's really good. The horrors multiply with mathematical precision. The imbecile Pope on its jewelled commode, voiding shit and gold coins, mumbling idiot phrases, jingles, pointless statistics. So that's a pretty big. So basically, and the enemy of the Apocryphon of John is basically the established church, right? The enemy of that John. Also, you got a thing where the kind of the spokenness of scripture is no better than idiot phrases, jingles, or pointless statistics. Also feels like sort of like Mercury, Hermes energy, kind of gone, having lost any context, right? Having just kind of gone into overdrive. Um, Towering behind him, one of 9 corrupt Buddhas, obese and senile, his brain rotted like a tooth by the sweet unending bliss of false enlightenment. The Buddha masturbates like a monkey in a cage. This is kind of what's happening to Dane. He is, in a way, the one of 9 corrupt Buddhas, obese and senile, with their brain rotted like a tooth by the sweet unending bliss of false enlightenment. That's where Dane is at the moment. That's why Barbara had to come and wake him up. The Buddha masturbates like a monkey in a cage. MK Ultra vibes in that, or at least it's like early 20th century dark psychology experiments, I think, I don't want to be too like Kabbalah about it, but I think the 4 angels on orthocracy, I think you could put them on Malkuth and Yesod, and I think the idiot Pope could be Hod. And then I think the Buddha could be a skip up from Hod to uh, Tifereth. And then behind him, kind of beyond the 9 corrupt beyond the corrupt Buddha, you have the Scalpel Choir, worm-eaten, leather-bound Bible spirits, maimed women in white Marilyn Monroe dresses, which is so Clive Barker it hurts. Like that's literally from a Clive Barker comic book, which was adapted into a cool comic. With false eyelashes stitched along bare bleeding forearms. You're getting quite like abyssal here, right? It needs a sacrifice. The only thing he has to give, abscess, abyss. There's a little bit of a. I think that's what's happening here. Like the kind of the broken spear is about to pop through and cover up our entire universe, or the kind of the reverse tree of life stuff, which lives through the abyss. Do you remember that from the Kenneth Grant stuff in issue 9 that we talked about when King Mob and Co go into the King Mob and John of Dreams go into the church and in Philadelphia. Yeah, like this is all demons from the reverse tree of life coming through into our world. So this does, although this is all very sort of Morrison-y and it's very Clive Barker-y, it's also just quite like Kenneth Grant's version of Thelema-y as well, you know? Uh, it needs a sacrifice. The only thing he has to give. The banal horror movie host gathers to shrill and gibber. Do you remember we've seen horror movie hosts a lot as well, right? In the adverts. If only there'd been an advert for him in here. But like all of those adverts for Tales from the Crypt and stuff, the reboot. Uh, it almost sounds like words if you listen hard enough. One word, himself. So the sacrifice that he has to give to seal the abscess, or the abyss, let's say, is himself. Mr. Six is going to have to sacrifice himself. Jesus, that was a long one. Oh my God, it gets really complex here. I'm going to try and rip through it quicker though, because I do think it's fairly self-explanatory. So then Dane gets this, as Dane is being pulled out of enlightenment, Barbalith is going, Dane, return. And he's like, but I was happy. And he's like, no, you weren't happy. Um, and Dane says, are you Jesus? And he kind of says, and he appears, and Barbalith turns into Jesus to be like, okay, chill out. I'm Jesus, if it helps. But I'm not the God of your fathers. I am the hidden stone and break all hearts. Break open your heart. Come from below, rise unto the heights, descend again with knowledge. So kind of Dane's got to finish off his work, right? He's had this kind of like, enlightenment moment. But if he just kind of goes off into like, oh, please, then he's just lost. He's just gone. He'll just disappear. He'll just dissipate. And Jesus is like, no, no, come back, be pinned to the earth, because you know in your heart that it's the right thing to do, and as we saw before, Dane's heart wants to heal and reconcile the pain of the universe within himself, and however he might be able to achieve that. And then Jesus turns into a mirror, and Dane's just kind of talking to himself. Is that you, Jesus? Fucking hell, man. And Jesus is being super groovy here. He looks like a real like Jack Kirby New God thing. The archons of this eon come before you. They seal you with this seal. You may say their names, and they must withdraw. Remember. The lost one, your adversary, cannot be defeated at this stage, but entering the local grid has made it real. Being real, it is now vulnerable to time and to process. Really big thing to learn, kids. Spirits are subject to time and to process. They may be a lot older than you, but they're not infinite. And you get this in Twin Peaks Volume 3 as well, right? Spirits get old. That's a bit difficult to get your head around, but they do. Because remember, like, Yaldabaoth, he's not just in the world whose world we live in, and that's not this guy. It's not Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is like way bigger than him. Like psychic and spiritual stuff is in the material world too. Well, not the material, but it's in the world too. So, Yaldabaoth is all that as well. All of the weird spirit psychic stuff, even though it's not matter in the way that we think of matter, it is in the material world. So it is now vulnerable to time and to process. And it does get a bit weird. I'm a bit like, is this the first time that the King of All Tears has ever sort of come into our world? I know the time doesn't apply to him quite so much. Oh my god, I've been there for an hour. Maybe I'll stop here before we get to the hauntology stuff. It's getting quite late. We're going to do a 2. That's not a bad idea, though. I really ranted on about the... okay, yeah, that's not a bad idea. I really ranted on about that. And I'll come straight back in. I'll come straight back in a few days' time. And we'll do issuesode 24 part 2 of the Invisible podcast. Yeah, that works, doesn't it? I feel a bit bad for jibbing out, but I've been going for an hour, and there's at least an hour more, and I've got to do stuff, and we'll jump straight into the Mark Fisher hauntology stuff, at the start of episode 2. I promise. Okay. I think that's not a bad solution. I feel a bit guilty, but we're going to do that because I've been going for an hour. You've got an hour of pod, and this is part 1. We've done part 1 and part 2 before. It's not unprecedented. I need to go and sort stuff out and have my dinner. And yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, that's fine. I'm really sorry if that's not fine. I think it's fine. Okay. Part 1 was great. We talked a lot about the secret Apocryphon of John and all of these Clive Barker-esque trippinesses, which you'll need to remember because we come back to them at the end of episode 2. Okay. They're relevant to how this issue closes, not the story in the issue, but the comic closes. So we are going to have to come back to that. So don't forget the Gospel of John crushing crystal purple skull and all of the funky demons. Okay? Remember that. Okay, but that's it. So we've done this episode, or we've done part 1 of this episode, and part 2 we'll do again soon, and it'll only be a few days before the next one comes out. Okay? Maybe a week. But it won't be too long. I think that works. I think that makes sense. I don't feel too guilty about that. Obviously, I do feel a bit guilty about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it so much. But that's what we're going to do because I've got to go and sort some stuff out and have my dinner ready. And there's a long way to go yet. Didn't think this episode would be this big, but I really rattled on about the Secret Gospel of John stuff. I really enjoyed reading it and would recommend it. Okay, just stop now, you idiot. Okay, lots of love. Cheers for watching. More very soon. Bye.